In this video, we're going to go over 5 tips to improve on Brig. If you like this content, make sure to like and subscribe. You can check me out on Twitch, link in the description below. The first thing I want to go over, and in my opinion, probably the most important thing, is your positioning. There seems to be a fundamental misunderstanding with this. Just because Brig is a melee hero, they feel like they always have to play up close and aggressive. I'm going to tell you right now, that is not how you play Brig. Brig is actually pretty easy to kill, even though she has more health than the other supports and has a shield. If you're out of position and someone catches you off guard, you can just get deleted still. But don't get me wrong, there are absolutely times you can be aggressive, and we're going to explain that later into the video. But usually, most of the time, you want to be playing a lot more passive than you usually are. To take it a step further, you should always make playing your life the main goal on Brig, meaning you're just practically playing to never die. So again, even though Brig is probably the most tanky support, you actually have to play her like a support still, opposed to positioning like a tank and being over the top aggro and probably getting destroyed. Another good tip for positioning is you normally want to play around your other support or somebody that you feel like is vulnerable on your team. Normally the vulnerable person always is the other support, but it could also be a DPS player that's not as mobile as the other heroes. With that being said though, just remember, your life always comes first over everybody else's. So if that person is doing something pretty suspect to the point you feel like there's no saving them, don't try to save them because you're probably just going to die too. So just keep playing your life. Which is going to lead me into my second point, which is your pack usage. I feel like the biggest mistake people make with pack usage is they see someone take damage and they kind of just panic and they just spam all of their packs on this person even if they take just a little bit of damage. The problem with this is, obviously you waste 2 packs because you only needed 1 to begin with, and now your packs are on cooldown and you could have invested them way more tactically and actually support your team as the fight progresses. So just remember, it doesn't matter if you just spam packs on people, it doesn't increase the healing it does, all it does is increase the healing it does over time. So normally spamming packs on people isn't really the play, unless it's maybe a tank or something and they're really into a fight and you know they're going to need long sustained heals. Another mistake people make with pack usage is I feel like they always prioritize the wrong person. Packs are actually extremely good for enabling DPS players, especially heroes like Genji and Tracer who actually have to be in the fight and position a little more aggressively to get value. It is so much easier for you to focus these people instead of having an Ana or a BAP do it, for example, because they actually have to normally focus on putting more healing into the tank than you will. And it's a lot harder for them to hit their shots because if a Genji's like jumping around or climbing walls, they're going to have to put a lot more focus into hitting those shots. All you have to do is look at them and press a button, so it's much easier for Brig to do it. There's 2 things here I actually have to add as well though. Please do not forget about your other support. Even though you're playing on them and let's say you proc Inspire, sometimes that isn't enough. You need to use a pack as well in some instances just to get that extra healing off and keep them alive throughout the fight. Also, just because we prioritize the DPS does not mean we always ignore the tank. If they are in position to get value and are making space for your team, you can absolutely use a pack on them to sustain them. Just don't go too crazy with it where you invest your entire kit into him and then you have DPS who need help and they ultimately end up dying because you can't support them. Tip number 3 is going to be the best way to use Rally. Alright, so you're probably sick of me talking about playing super passive and pretty much playing scared for the most part. Now is the time you can actually play pretty aggressive. Rally is actually a great engage ult, so usually you want to use this to push your team into a fight, opposed to treating it like a defensive ult like Trank or Beat. If you treat this like those ults and you try to react to something like a lot of pressure being put on your team, that most likely means that you took too long to use the ult and it's too late to save them, because teams are still really capable of killing through a Rally. And normally, this ult isn't powerful enough to sustain you through other teams' game-winning ults, like Blade for example. So always just keep the mindset, it's normally better to just use this ult aggressively instead of defensively, because defensively usually isn't ever enough. But using this to sustain a team early and maybe get a couple picks because you have a little bit of overheal is going to be the much better option. So take this as your chance as a Brig player to go a little more aggressive, but one thing to keep in mind, just check when the ult is actually about to expire. Because if the ult does expire and you're going hyper aggressive and don't realize it, you can get bursted down pretty quickly. Tip number 4 is going to be Shield Bash usage. So all you Overwatch 1 players remember that Shield Bash actually used to be a stun. With Overwatch 2 coming out, they decided to remove that and instead just compensate it with extra damage per bash. And on top of that, they actually gave it increased mobility. With this, what I realized was that bash actually isn't as good as it used to be when using it onto an enemy target, but instead, this actually turned out to be a great mobility tool. With the increased mobility, it actually increases your survivability by a great deal. It allows you at times to be a little more aggressive than you normally could, because now you always have the option to bash away, and now you always have the flexibility to disengage from something that you would consider a threat. So although at times you can use bash to maybe secure a kill on a target, understand that it's a great tool for mobility as well. Which brings us to our last tip, using whipshot. Now that we know that we have to position more passively, whipshot is going to be very important in order to proc your inspires more often. Normally you can use this ability to deny heroes engaging on you, or separating yourself from enemies, but another good way to go about this is to focus whipshot onto enemy tanks, because they're way easier to hit and you'll keep your inspire uptime much higher. You want to make that your focus usually when you're in those fights where healing seems to be a premium, so you can keep your team nice and sustained throughout them. I want to stress this to you though. Managing packs and playing your life will always be more important than proccing inspire. You never want to full send it just for that reason alone. So just stick to the fundamentals of playing your life, good pack usage, and making sure you're landing those whip shots to keep your inspire time as high as possible. And remember, if you do play like that, you always can shield bash away, so use that as a mobility tool as well. Thank you guys for watching. If you have any questions, feel free to ask down in the comments section, or you guys can reach me on Twitch or Discord, links down in the description below. Until next time, see you guys later.